Everybody ready to go live? Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this meeting of the Local Development Framework Subcommittee for the 17th of October 2022. Members, thank you for coming down tonight. I will just go through the evacuation procedure, albeit you are well versed in it and there are no members of the public here. So in the event of alarm, please leave by the exit at the rear or the exit behind me, gather on the car park and wait for Mrs. Barrett to release you should there be any need for us to remain once the alarms have gone off. Is everybody okay with the evacuation procedure? Yeah, thank you much indeed. Apologies for absence. I have apologies from Councillor Tony Clues and Councillor Mark Simpson. Okay, no more. Thank you very much indeed. Members, can I ask whether item 3, anybody has any disclosable pecuniary or non-pecuniary interests? No? Okay, thank you very much indeed. Agenda item 4 is the minutes of the meeting of the Local Development Framework Subcommittee held on the 23rd of May 2022. Now, I gave my apologies for these, however, I can see that we've got Councillor Chambers and Councillor Hancock's present. So can you please, first of all, check them for accuracy? Page 4.1 or page 3 of 74. And page 4.2, which is page 4 of 74. Members, are you happy that those are a true and accurate record? Yeah. Yeah. Okay, for adoption then, please. Agreed? I'll sign them. Thank you. That takes us on to agenda item number 5, which is in your papers, which is the Housing and Employment Land Availability Assessment, otherwise known as the HELA methodology. I was just about to get that. Dot, so, Dot, you're going to present this paper? Yeah.
Okay. I'll leave it for members to ask any questions, but I'll just run through the papers that you've got in front of you. So you've got the overall report, and as you can see, we went out for consultation last November, and all the representations that were made are included in Appendix 2 of the report. As you'll see, every local authority within the Coventry and Warwickshire area actually went out for consultation at the same time. So some of the comments were sent to all of us, some of them to individual authorities, but all the representations are listed with a response in there in saying whether there's any change at all to Appendix 1. Appendix 1 is actually the methodology itself, and this basically is a way to make sure that each of the local authorities is carrying out the assessment of sites for housing, employment or other uses that will go into eventually their local plans in the same manner, so that we can all say that we've all treated every site exactly the same, or if there is a difference, we can explain why there is a difference. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, cool. A fairly comprehensive report. Does anybody have any questions for Doc?
I've got a few. The document that we've got in front of us from it was dated February 2022. And sorry, I'm just trying to find the header for it.
It's on page 7 of 72, if that helps.
Right. Okay, 7 of 72. Thank you. Yes. So, so the first thing is, why is it taking so long, given that it was November of last year that we went out to consultation on this methodology, and it's now September 2022. And then in terms of the comments back and the figure 1, which is the matrix, I'm just trying to find where that figure 1 is. There's a sort of shaded thing. Yeah, here we are, figure 1. And it's on page 18 of 72, availability and achievability versus suitability. What I don't understand in terms of this idea of a consistent approach to evaluating sites and openness and transparency in explaining why some are suitable and others not, is a lot of the comments that we got back, not necessarily Morphologist, but generally what came back around this methodology was that it still gives huge scope to every local authority to do whatever they like, really. And so when you look at this matrix in figure 1, which has got no detail behind it, just a kind of red, amber and orange and green rating, what I don't understand is how this methodology has responded to that lack of tighter, smart criteria, if you like, about the evaluation of these sites within their local area. I mean, or is it just as it was? It's still a free-for-all, basically, for local authorities to decide which sites they put forward or not. That's my first question, because I don't get the sense from this document or from the methodology that's proposed, and I particularly don't get it from figure 1, is where that sort of challenge audit, specificity of approach that you could challenge, I don't know, Rugby or Nuneaton or us around why they've chosen some and not others. That's my first question. And then the other.
Should we deal with the question?
Yeah, okay.
Because that's a good question, isn't it? What scrutiny is available to the assessment framework that's down there, and I presume much of it is down to subjective judgment. It feels.
Well, it just feels that it's still been left very loose, so that local authorities can do what they like. And although the aim was consistent methodology, I don't get the sense that that's actually what's emerged.
Okay. If I can just explain in terms of timing, then. Yes, this was agreed in an officer group back in February 2022, and each of the local authorities were then to take it through their own processes. We were planning to bring this, I think, if memory serves me right, back in April, but for some reason it got missed off the agenda, and that was down to us missing it off. And then, of course, it was due to have come in September, and now we're into October. So it's just how it's happened, and it's more the mechanics of it more than anything else. And because it was more to do with the methodology, we didn't feel that there was the urgency to bring it to members, mainly because we're not planning on doing a call for sites for at least another 6-9 months at the very earliest. So I think it was more to do with that than anything else. So there's no other reason behind it.
Okay, is everybody happy with the no urgency? So to the point.
In terms of the actual framework, it is a framework, and it's to try and make sure that at least the basis of how we look at sites actually starts out in a very similar manner, because what we don't want is everybody to have their own set of criteria at the very start and then not really understanding why somebody's done something. So it is a baseline, and I'll agree that there is still that element of leeway. There's an element of how do we assess them internally by officers. Members yourself might want to assess things slightly differently. So it's not saying every single site has to be only assessed by what's in here. There may be other criteria that we want to add on as and when we get to those call for sites. But it's to give that element of consistency so that when as officers and members we look at, say, Rugby's in the future, that we can actually say, oh, actually, yeah, I can understand why they've picked those sites and not included those. Whereas I think the last time we did this, although there was some methodology there, there was still that element, well, why have you done that bit and not this bit? And so it's trying to get over those issues.
Okay.
So yeah, it's not a complete science. It isn't saying this is the only evidence we will use.
So,
So-
you
so
were
just-
asking about the detail behind the decisions.
Yeah.
Well, yes, and also the implications, and it may not be relevant, but the sense of, the challenge around the lorry park on the A5 was that when you take a strategic view of our employment sites that have been identified within our local plan, that we hadn't identified enough of them, and that it was a very low sort of element in our local plan that was, from their point of view, the challenge, the developers, was understating the need for employment and understating the need for logistics sites on a regional basis, etc., etc. So I suppose my question is, if and when, if it comes to appeal that site as a planning application, which is probably in the distant future when this methodology has been accepted and there's been a call for sites, is how does that alter the context in which not only us are challenged, but other or neighbouring authorities that see the need for logistics sites and more employment sites and all that sort of strategic map that was given to us. How does this sit in the evaluation of whether or not that challenge is a valid one, and at appeal, should it go to appeal? Where does something like this sit? And you may say, well, it's totally irrelevant because it's not there yet, but it's important, obviously, because along the A5 and the need for more employment sites, it's going to be a continuing challenge, isn't it?
Yeah, I'll answer that.
Yeah, sorry, please.
In terms of the hello, that's in the production of the local plan, so the plan policy side. In terms of a planning application, that could be assessed through a very similar way through the assessment that we've got in here, but it's outside of that assessment, because what we would be doing for the local plan is doing a call for sites in one respect, so using the hello, but there'll then be other evidence that will be collated, say on the need for employment sites, the need for housing sites. So there'll be what's called a HEDNA, a housing employment, housing and economic development needs assessment. So there's all those pieces of evidence that will also come into the mix. So this is only one technical part of the process. It isn't policy making at all. It's purely trying to assess the sites in the same manner between each of them, and trying to give them a score as to whether they are good sites, they're okay sites and they've got issues, or whether they just are sites that we just don't want to consider. So it's not saying that the ones that are green will eventually be allocations, but it helps them in that process towards that. And there may even be some amber ones in there that you can say, well, if we can get over those particular issues, everything else actually works really well with those particular sites. So this is more to do with the planning policy side than it is with a planning application that comes in outside of the local plan process.
But Jackie, thank you for that. But Jackie's question is a good one, isn't it? So will this site assessment matrix be available to be scrutinised by neighbouring authorities? Because clearly if you were managing a build that you didn't want to take place, you would score everything in red and show that it was an unsuitable site. So recognising that the majority of this is built around cooperation and indeed the duty of to cooperate, with the site assessment matrix, then we would be in a position where, should we say we were unhappy about a neighbouring authority's decision, we could go to the matrix, understand why they scored it like that, and perhaps challenge why they scored it.
Yes, definitely. As part of the local plan process, the evidence that sits behind a local plan is equally up for challenge as it is the local plan itself. And so when we were looking at the Coventry local plan, we went through in detail all of the site assessments, why have you done that? Why have you done this? And we scrutinise them all in that way to make sure, I suppose, that they've squeezed enough of the juice out of the lemon, really, to make sure that they'd really looked at every opportunity that they possibly could. It's not an exact science, I'll agree to that, but it's at least a good framework to be able to assess those.
The only other point I wanted to add to what Dot said, it's also a procedural thing to do with the inspector's interpretation or assessment of your local plan. If you're part of a wider sub-regional or regional in-principle methodology, then he's got, in most cases, comparison with other authorities that have gone through the process, and he then has the experience of that inspector to help inform him. But also it gives him reassurance that the duty to cooperate is being addressed, that the way it's been assessed is consistent, so he won't necessarily be able, he won't have the difficulty of saying to agents, sorry, that they haven't complied with policy or with national policy guidance correctly. Because if all the group, this is the Coventry, Solihull, Warwickshire area planning authorities groups, are all operating on a consistent basis, that is, you have your local differences and your additional policy directions. So you may want your pro-development, ethnic development, focus on main urban areas and avoid main urban areas, look for a more dispersed approach. It depends how you do it, but you do that locally. But the actual base principle, if that's been agreed, and that's how they're assessed before they get to that stage, it gives them reassurance, and then he can turn around to the inspector, effectively to the objectors or to the developers, pressurising what we consider are inappropriate sites. He feels comfortable and supported that he can resist that approach. So it does give him a little bit of power to his elbow.
Jack, do that. It's a fairly complex debate, isn't it? Do you answer the question?
Yeah, I think so. It's just, in applying this, do we think we're going to end up with more employment sites and so on? And where does Junction 9 sit? It's kind of what are the implications, given that we've finished our local plan, I don't know, 18 months ago, and it's been inspected, and it's really kind of how much more turbulence can we expect around the challenges, the future planning applications, inspectors' appeals as a result of applying this methodology and potentially having challenge from other authorities. I'm not saying there's anything we do about it, it's just, do we have to factor this in to kind of understand that?
I think the overall answer is probably yes, there won't be any less turbulence in the next review of the local plan. However, the HELO itself is a technical document. It will not say North Warwickshire Borough Council has to have 7,000 houses and 100 hectares of employment land. What the HELO is saying all those sites that could potentially deliver the housing or the employment requirement are these ones. And that's all that it does. It doesn't actually say how much you actually need of it.
Oh, right. Okay.
So that's another piece of evidence that would have to be looked at.
You said could and not should, didn't you, in the report? Which I thought was an interesting summary. So it's you could do this, not you should do this. Yeah. Okay, good. Jackie, is that right?
Yeah, no, Dan wanted to say.
Dan?
It's only a little thing, actually, is that you said about squeezing the lemon. That would actually come back to probably my view on, so we've got the strategic gap. So what happens when other authorities decide that we haven't squeezed the lemon enough? Where do we stand? Because I've looked through it all and it's got suitability should be assessed on our local plans, should be looked at our designs, appropriateness, like yada, all nice words. But at the end of the day, if Coventry come to us and say, we've took 2 warehouses, so you're going to build 1, where do we stand on that? Does this support us? Does this protect us? Does this anything? That's because they're going to try and squeeze out the lemon as well, aren't they? Let's be brutal.
This is purely to assess the sites that we may require.
Okay.
So it's still not saying how much or where we would want to do that. So that would come down to the duty to cooperate,
Yes.
the negotiations, the work that we do behind the scenes in terms of assessing sites, in terms of looking at the other evidence that's there, and coming to yourselves with a plan or options and saying, to do X, this is what we're suggesting. And so what we would do is look at the evidence on the amount of development. Then we'd look at this information and say, these are the potential sites, or how do they fit in with either the existing local plan or an amended local plan? And then we would look at them from that perspective. But the sites will already have been assessed through this process.
Okay.
And once we've produced the Strategic Housing Land Availability Assessment, the SHLA, in the past, and that's what this used to be called. So we had those in the past, and they just give an indication of where the sites are. And throughout the process of producing a local plan, you review that, or you add additional sites, assess those additional sites as you go through the process. So any new ones as well that say we produce a draft local plan, somebody submits a site that we've never even thought about or seen before, then we would assess them again against this methodology.
So the point is here that this is a method.
Yes.
It will still come to the council. It will
Yes.
still come to the councillors. They will make the decision. So
Absolutely.
if we found that there was a certain site that was in our local plan that was protected, we could still protect that if we found necessary. Obviously, hard decisions to happen, but that's what we could do.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Michael?
If I can be devil's advocate without being pushed by authority at this point, it also gives you the opportunity, having brought to your attention a number of recent local plan reviews currently in consultation. If it's one of the authorities within the methodology approach, it gives you the opportunity to look at them and say, oh, this site seems from the methodology point of view reasonable. You've got to understand they're still going to have a policy, a local policy view on what, where and how they want it. But it does mean if you feel, as we have felt recently, that a number of other authorities are not pulling their weight in relation to the shortfalls coming out of either Coventry or Birmingham and Greater Birmingham housing mapping area, it gives us a little bit of elbow weight to say, well, we've had a look. This seems to be reasonable, this site or these additional sites. Part of your objection or your representation to the local authority can be saying it can be on the basis of the HELA and any subsequent further work. We do believe sincerely that you still have an opportunity to maximise or increase your delivery, particularly in relation to how North Warwickshire is approached. So it can be used as a soft stick to beat your neighbours with, without being too rude to some of our neighbours. So it is also worth looking at it in those terms. Although that is always a sensitive area, I must say, because I did do the lemon squeezing on behalf of North Warwickshire for the Coventry sites. It can cause some local disagreements with officers on what goes where and how much you can squeeze into that or out.
Members, any more questions for Dorothy or Mike on the issue?
Well, the second point that was raised as
Yes.
part of the consultation, if I may, Chair, was about
Yeah.
was there enough weight being given to the environmental considerations in the methodology? And although the sort of the third or fourth column says pro forma amended to take account of some of the points about ecology and environment and biodiversity, I suppose it's really what changes were made and are you sufficiently happy with what was inserted to reassure us that aspect of the methodology is now properly and strongly in place.
Yeah, there are changes in the document, and I think it's a difficult one because ecology, environment, climate change are all going to be so much higher priorities in any future local plan. And I think the header gives it a good starter for 10, but it's not going to give you all the answers. And it may be that, and well, it will be, that we'll be asking for more information on a lot of these sites in the future, particularly with climate change. There's the new guidance and implementation for the biodiversity offsetting as well. So, biodiversity net gain. So there's all those sorts of things that are also gathering speed as well. But I think on balance, I think yes, it does to a point, but we know that more information will be required.
Okay. All right, thank you. So, members, we've got some recommendations on page 501, which is page 572. Can we just go through the recommendations and take a vote on them? So members, on the basis of the discussion we've had, recommendation A is that the housing and employment and availability assessment dealer methodology be approved. Members, can I ask you all those in favour? Thank you. Nobody against and non-abstentions, so that's carried. And then the second recommendation is that any future calls for sites by the Borough Council be carried out in general compliance with the methodology. Members, are you happy with that? Yeah, I suppose we should do proposers and seconders as well, shouldn't we? If I was to do it, probably. Jackie, would you propose?
Yes.
Daniel, second. Excellent for both of them. Okay, thank you. Right, agenda item number 5 completed. We move quickly on to agenda item number 6, which is the local development scheme update for September.
Yes, this was just an update of the local development scheme, which is basically our high-level work programme. As you'll see in Appendix A on page 71 of 72, what the changes that have been made are in relation to the timing of the consultations for the Gypsy and Traveller DPD and the employment DPD. We've actually said that it would be spring next year now for the Gypsy and Travellers, but early next year for the employment DPD. And that's what we'll be working towards at the moment. And I just updated as well the dates for the SPDs. So the open space recreation and the bin storage are out for consultation in now.
And we would request that everybody reviews both of those SPDs because they will become policy for the borough once they are adopted. And goodness knows, somewhere to put your bins is dead important.
It is for the planning applications, yes, but the SPDs are not policy. I just should say that they're technical advice. So.
Right, okay. Thank you. Dan?
I just have a question on the, obviously there's number 2, we talk about the planning documents and we go into that, obviously we have a lot of neighbourhood plans. Dordon's has gone through consultation again, I believe, because there were some changes to it. I haven't seen a Polesworth consultation yet. I remember bringing it up at a couple of meetings ago that I'm getting more and more concerned, and I have raised it at parish council meetings as well, that there will be planning applications coming in, and without a neighbourhood plan, the planning application will be voted on as per our planning documents. Is there any movement that you can tell us about these 2 neighbourhood plans? I know Dordon's consultation, so that should be hopefully adopted quite quickly, I would assume. But Polesworth, I've not seen anything come through yet.
Okay. The Dordon neighbourhood plan is at what's called Regulation 14 stage. So they're doing the consultation at the moment. They then will submit their neighbourhood plan along with any representations to us as a borough council. We'll then go out for consultation for a further 6 weeks, and then if need be, we will then work with the neighbourhood plan team to call an examination into that neighbourhood plan. once they've had the examination, then they'll be able to go forward to a referendum. So it's still got a number of stages and places to go, but it's at least on that road now. In terms of Polesworth, I've been to have a meeting with Polesworth Parish Council. They have submitted a very, very early draft to us. We've made cut comments on that. They are taking that away, and at the moment, I think the timetable is that they're hoping to go out for consultation with that either before Christmas or after Christmas. So that is now progressing as well.
So if sorry, I've got to, so I get these timings in my head. So if that neighbourhood plan was submitted to go to regulation 14, did you say, or consultation after Christmas, we wouldn't see an adopted neighbourhood plan proposal until what, May next year, minimum?
I would say that's probably at the very minimum. It could be done potentially if there isn't an examination required. So, I mean, nowadays the examinations are a lot quicker, and they don't tend to be in person, so they can be turned around within a month to 6 weeks. So, but we'll work with them as much as we can to get them along the process as quickly as we can.
Thank you.
Becky, okay?
Yeah.
Okay then, members, thank you for that. Right, again, we have some recommendations on the report, and that is that the local development scheme as updated be approved. So can I see a thank you, Dan?
Sorry, could I just ask how the consultation around bin storage is going? I mean, how do we, is it a public consultation, is it? And how do we make the public aware of it?
Sue Wilson would have sent out an email some weeks ago to all members with the consultation on that. Yeah. I'm just having confirmation as I've been away on holiday. I'm just making sure that I've got my facts right. So that was done in September. I think we must be coming close to the closing. Is that next week?
I think it's 27th October. Yes,
next. It got extended because unfortunately of the passing of the Queen. So we extended the consultation deadline. But if for any reason, I'll ask Sue when she's back to recirculate the email.
I was going to say, can we do them both? Because clearly they both are important in terms of member thinking, particularly the green space. But as we've already acknowledged, it's important to have somewhere to put your bins.
Chair, just for advice, I was monitoring, because Sue's been away as well, monitoring the input of responses. We haven't had a great deal, I have to be honest.
Is that not?
No, yeah, we've had very few.
Okay, well, let's get it recirculated again. Perhaps, Mike, if we could just stress to members the importance of the document and their views.
I've just found it, 20th of September. Yeah,
well, let's recirculate it again with a new closing date. Okay, right, so everybody happy to move to the recommendations? Okay. So we've got recommendation proposed by Dan. I'll second it. Members, all those in favour? That's it. That's unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. That now takes us on to the additional agenda item, which is about the A5 consultation. So, members, have you got the papers in front of you?
Yeah.
Yeah. So this matter was considered at executive board last week, and the decision was that it would be brought to this board as well. So, Dot, would you like to report?
Yeah, I mean, you've got the report in front of you with the brochure, and as you'll see, the brochure is Appendix A. But in 4.3 of the report, you'll see what stage national highways are at. Yeah. They're actually only at stage 2. So they've made it clear that the consultation event that I attended was that they are open to all suggestions and all comments at this stage. It isn't confined only to what the brochure is about, because I know the webinar that I was at, they were actually talking about New Street, Long Street, and that actually isn't, I couldn't find any reference to that within the papers. As you'll see in Appendix B is the start of the response to the consultation. You've also got, from the executive board last week, there were a number of comments that were also made, and they'll be incorporated into that response. And then any comments from yourselves from this evening. I've got a summary of last week's comments if you want me to run through those, if that you'd find that helpful. But it's
I think it would help avoid duplication, wouldn't it, in terms of discussion?
Yeah, please don't. So we'll just talk about the comments that were made at exec board, which the chief executive noted and forwarded on to Dot. So Dot, do you want to just summarise them?
Okay. The comments were, the consultation seems to be in isolation from any real dialogue with us as a local planning authority regarding how it relates to the new developments. So that's in relation to site H4 in particular, which is just to the north of the A5.
Should we deal with these just as we go through them? Yeah, so that was the comment, that there was no illustration about how H4 and the link road for H4 fitted into any of the proposed schemes.
I mean, thank you, Chairman, for allowing it to come to this subcommittee, because I think trying to understand the process that's been going on before we got the glossy brochure, as it were, and how those options, because from a member point of view, there's if you look at the snapshots, you have the local plan, the inspector saying the A5 is absolutely crucial to delivering our local plan, and without some investment in the A5, I'm going to have to make your local plan invalid. And in that context, there was the strategic transport assessment, which talked about, as you quite rightly, draw attention to phases 3 and 4, the Grendon bypass, etc., etc. And that's all linked with the trajectories of housing development. But the sense was when we had our more in-depth meeting with the parish council was that they almost grudgingly they were having to take forward this bit from this bit of government that they weren't actually part of, and so they were handling it, but they weren't really convinced that in terms of their drivers, which was to get this A5 pipeline sorted, that it was almost like why you just couldn't quite understand why they were leading it, because the processes that were coming out in terms of their understanding of what all the issues were, even the understanding of the planning application for the Lorry Park new logistics site, all the 100,000 houses that are going to be built along the A5, you just got this feeling it was being done in a kind of silo way, because somebody in government has said we've got this HIF bid and you've got to actually get on and get some options down on the table. And I suppose what I was expecting from the Highways Authority, the engagement with ourselves as a planning authority and National Highways, was a much more kind of integrated set of options, given how long it's taken, because it's like 2017, is it, since you first started to do that crude diagram with the mauve bits on it that were kind of on the table as the local plan was coming through. It just feels like what I wasn't expecting with the cycleways and the walkways and the crossings and so on. It just doesn't feel like we've got to a point where there's any detail yet, or indeed evidence to support any of the options that are in front of us in terms of traffic.
So, good challenge of National Highways, Doc.
I think I can just sympathise with your frustrations, because it's exactly the frustrations I've had at every single meeting I've had with National Highways. I went to the webinar and they were asked when the road would be built, and I know that in the local plan and all the evidence and all the information, there's contracts between Homes England or between the county and MHCLG, and the use of the money and everything else. It has dates in there. It has the 1st of April 2026, they have to be on site, and it should be completed and open for traffic by the 31st of March 2028. And they could not give that answer at the webinar. And every meeting, I think Mike will agree, our frustrations are, yes, very much at the
They are the lead agency for getting this A5 development.
They are the lead agency because it's the A5 is a strategic front road.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it would have been Warwickshire County Council. Warwickshire County Council, though, is the main sponsor of the road at a national level. So they're the ones that are sponsoring the delivery of that based on the borough's local plan housing delivery.
Does anyone at the Highways, sorry, through you, Chair, does anybody at the Highways Authority actually care about how this is going? Because it feels as though it's icing past them, so they'll do it their way. With actually the engagement of the different layers of government in and the kind of I just feel very sorry for National Highways actually, because it felt like we've been dumped with this job of coming up with these options. There's 70 million or whatever on the table, and this is how we've gone about it. But if the Highways Authority have not actually insisted as a sponsor in certain prerequisites about how to work out some of the detail, then surely we should be feeding back to the Highways Authority as well, shouldn't we? I mean, have they actually been involved at all in really?
National Highways are involved.
No, I mean the Highways Authority.
Warwickshire County Council, yes, they're involved at every meeting I go to. There's somebody from the County Council there, and also we're part of the A5 strategy group as well. MPs have been involved as well, and so yeah, it's a very frustration.
Michael?
Through the chair, just as an update on the 23rd, the APAC partnership had a meeting, and I have to agree, as the doctor said, we have the same frustration with National Highways, and I know the County Council also have the same opinion and concerns in terms of how it's dragged out, given that they did a significant amount of detailed work for the HIF bid.
The county did.
Before it even got to. My personal reactions from National Highways and how their approach is, and we have, to be honest, specifically argued and complained about the fact that they don't seem to understand the implications and the relationship with the local plan. The process you see on page 6/2, and the way that's been explained to me at recent developers meetings, specifically on this issue and through the APAC partnership, is that it doesn't matter that it's a HIF bid and it's coming from the Ministry of Housing. That's where the money's coming from. They're aware of it. But once it was handed to them, they have a very, very formalised set process that they go through, and it doesn't matter what the scheme is, where it comes from, or who is funding it. Because of their process-driven manner, they operate on a 5-year funded scheme, very, very, very narrow. They only do certain things within a certain way, within a certain time. Very frustrating, because we have said, look, shouldn't we be at level 3 or 4? Because we've had a lot of what you're doing now is duplication. They've got this information, they've had this information from the county and from ourselves, but that was 2017, 2018, where the bid went through. So we're now in 2021, 22, and they're insisting that that has to be redone again. And I have some sympathy with terms of things like strategic flood risk, so the Penman group, you've got to get, with the climate change implications, it reassessed. But you would think you would have a head start, given that we've already got an awful lot of that data behind us. So it is very frustrating, but that is the process effectively they go through. The AFAC partnership has expressed similar frustration, probably stronger than ourselves, because of the abandonment of the Redgate and Longshoot improvement proposals, which was supposed to be through the RIS, the Route Investment Strategy proposal. So just for information, they, through the APAC partnership, and that includes ourselves, they are basically coordinating and bringing the MPs along the route, particularly ourselves and the southern and eastern authorities on the APAC, so Nuneaton, Bedworth,
including would be to use the tools we have through the MPs to put pressure on the Ministry of Transport, the various Secretary of State, for want of a better word, to move this process along because of the implications it has. Their obvious concerns are primarily going to be with the RIS3 scheme, which is our Grendon bypass element, and the element remaining basically from Atherstone, but it is really conjunction technically from Atherstone all the way up to the M69. Now that's just for your information. That conference, which is all around the pressure of getting pressure and getting agreement with the MPs, is at the Hinkley Sketchley Hotel, and I will remind Steve just to make sure we are attending. But my understanding is all the MPs, or most of the MPs, should be there. And in terms of the increased pressure, both through this process, but also yourselves as members and ourselves could do. I mean, it was picked up that the new Secretary of State, and I think still is, Anne-Marie Trevelyan. So it's because we weren't really very sure who was doing what at the time and who to focus on in terms of getting pressure. So it was Anne-Marie Trevelyan. The Under-Parliamentary Secretary was Catherine Fletcher. Baroness Vere, who we have previously written to, expressing major concern about the delay in terms of delivering the process and the loss of the other schemes that were originally agreed but have now been dropped and have now been pushed forward for the RIS3 bids, which means that they won't be going to bids until 2025. So you would then go through this process in 2025. So the actual start of any proposals from east of Atherstone will be 2030. It's the 5-year programme, is the way to do it. So you can sense the frustration of all the authorities along the line, given that, including ourselves, all the authorities, particularly the East, but also the North now, we have pending applications, significant ones, and they're all for logistics or significant housing. So it is being expressed to the highways, but they seem very set that this is the process. You have to wait for this process. You have to believe this is how it goes. So whether there's any opportunity in the future for that being streamlined, I don't know. But hopefully, following the conference at the Sketchley Hotel on the 22nd of October, which is this week, we're hoping we can bring some pressure to bear. I will cross my fingers having said that.
Jackie?
So, because I mean, that's really helpful in terms of the political strand of this, because what National Highways said at this sort of more or less more intimate meeting with the parish council, I'll put it that way, was that there, and I didn't realise it, I thought it was all a done deal, that there is yet another process of evaluating even this scheme before they can actually press the button on getting the money and the investment and, if you like, the spade in the ground. So, and I'd always thought, well, it's going to happen, but actually I've got the feeling that given all the turbulence there is at national level around governments and different government, that actually there is another process of approval that's got to be gone through at that higher level. And so that then raises the question of what most helpfully can one say as part of this consultation that actually adds grits to the mill so that they can actually use it to kind of push at least this one through, if not the RIS3 through. And in the end, what they said was that even that last bit of getting this bit approved is a political judgment. Somebody in high up there in the ministry of whatever has got to take a decision. Yes, that 70 million will be spent on this, and there's a final approval stage. So I suppose I was thinking almost tactically about, irrespective of what you think about this, is how do you and that's assuming anybody takes any notice of what you say anyway. But is there a way in which you can start to help arm them with the arguments that at least get this done? And in the context of RIS3, one definitely got the feeling that they had absolutely no confidence that any money was going to come to the A5 at all. I ended up thinking they think the A5 is a basket case. They were talking about, and there are some roads that have taken at least, and I don't want to depress you all, but there are some roads, I can tell you, have taken 20 years to get any improvements. And I was thinking, well, what about the economic case? What about the Midland Corridor and all that other thing that rests on what they describe as the pipeline, and there are 37 schemes that are going to be competing. So I suppose maybe it's not the consultation to the brochure, but it's actually how, as members, or indeed this conference that's coming up, do we try and make sure that we keep the pressure up from North Warwickshire Borough Council to get this done. But I am surprised there is there any detail behind the brochure? Is that in their files, have they got the detail that is, you don't know?
Have you seen their files?
It's just the brochure. So that little table which evaluates option A, B and C with pluses and almost like a witch report. You haven't seen any of the data that lies behind that.
No.
Is there any data that lies behind that?
I'll be honest, we don't know. We're assuming there is. But to be honest though, the HIF bid itself was extremely detailed. I mean, it went into hundreds of pages
Did it?
of
I don't think we ever saw it,
information,
did we?
plans and everything else. So yes, the modelling has had to be updated. I mean, the answer that I got back was that a decision could have been made at the very start of the process, that the Department of Transport could have done the assessment as a light process, but that was never instigated and we weren't aware that that was even an option. But what they're doing is doing their full assessment of how they assess any scheme that they use public money on. And so on the one hand, you think, well, they are using public money, so it should be scrutinised, it should be used in the best effect. However, public money was also used by the County Council ourselves to get that HIT scheme to that standard. And so
the crux of the question is, do you think, following this consultation process, that our local plan is at any more risk than it was before?
I'm pleased it has got to a consultation. So, and although I have misgivings about the consultation, and as you can see, about the concerns about it, at least we have got to a consultation on the options. They have given a timeline of next year as to developing those options into schemes and more thought out schemes and costed schemes. The concern I have is that the longer this takes, the longer we are towards not delivering on the local plan. And
so I think that point that you just made so well needs to be woven into the response, and I don't think that is very well represented yet, that concern about the threat to our local plan and its delivery, because it doesn't stand out to me in what you've written. So I think that's really crucial, actually.
Dan?
Yeah, I've obviously gone through what the executive board had said, and a lot of it is quite good, but for somebody who's lived in Dordon for all his life, I know how Long Street and New Street can be horrendous at the best of times. Obviously, I've looked at all the options. I do share your positive view that we have got to a consultation. In 33 years of my life, I haven't seen many of these about the A5 changing. So there is a positive, and I agree with that. I think my issue is that I agree we need to see the methods behind their reasons. There's 4 stars on some of these, and that means absolutely nothing to me. And if anybody else knows what the 4 stars mean, that'd be great. But again, it just seems like they put this colourful table together and said, yeah, go for option A, because that takes the shortest amount of time and costs the least amount. So I wonder why option A is the first choice on here. So we're going to, push that forward. I'd like it. At this moment, I believe at the consultation stage, there isn't much we can really say. Without the methodology, without the reasons behind why the options are good, I think we're very much have to wait till next year until we get some actual designs and info on what we're looking at. Looking at, again, the pictures, I can't quite work out. I've been trying to work out the Longstreet, Dordon, Polesworth kind of thing. I can see somebody had mentioned it in the exec board. I don't see this new road that comes out of Polesworth to the A5. And considering they're going to curve the A5 through some fields as well at some point, I don't understand how that links. And the little things like that that just freak me out, to be honest. And I know that's a really weird thing to say, but it's because I can't envisage. Before this, I could envisage the road would come out the east of Polesworth and it would join up near Grendon area into the A5. I could picture that. This now, I can't picture how the A5 Polesworth Dordon link. And then, as you said about the new street left turning, that has to stay because or everybody's going down Long Street. And if that happens, we have a bigger problem. So I'd like to see the methodology. I'd like to, I can't, maybe I'm looking at it wrong, but I can't quite envisage how it looks from these photos.
Okay, I think you make a good point there, don't you, Dan? So you make a point that actually this process and this consultation process is causing significant concerns within the residential community and the business community about the deliverability of the scheme and about the understanding of national highways in terms of existing pressures on local road networks and the A5 itself. So I think maybe, Dot, if we could find some words. I mean, I think that your feedback is nicely critical, and it is clear when you read it about your alarm and your displaced movement that's been said. I suppose we'd put Dan's feedback in the context of this published start date of the 1st of April 2026, and that itself now causing alarm because of the limited time to do the work that's necessary before construction needs to start. So I've got Hayden and then I've got Jackie. Hayden?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Without repeating everything everybody else has said, I'll share everybody else's. I mean, it's been a long time coming, isn't it? And it's a shame it's such a damn squid when it gets here, and you can't. I mean, what's just been said. I mean, I think that what's going to happen here is that, the problems that you've got in Long Street, it's not going to really alleviate. I think you're going to move them over, and all you're going to do is get a more sort of uniformed traffic jam, rather than sort of having everybody, dashing in and out up Long Street and stuck there, and everybody getting to know each other because you're there such a long time. There, it's going. I mean, it's not going to do anything for once those houses are built. It's just going to be one long traffic jam. If this is all it is, because it's a bypass to nowhere. I think we've lost the ability to put a real bypass in now and bypass the whole of this area. But this is just tinkering with the problem, I think. And as I said at the exec, my worry has been all along. This. I mean, everybody talks about the A5 and the problems on the A5, but when you live in the villages, either it's the other end Dordon or our end, Hurley, Wood End, and that way on, the amount of traffic that comes through the villages to avoid Junction 10. And that's going to be even more so now. In fact, these roads are going to make it a nice flow off, to this road round Bolter's Lane. Before before the big lorries get round that nice new island, thinking it's onto an A road, you're going to find themselves stuck at a lane. I just, so to say, I think there's been very little thought about it. I don't think, there's very little thought when you talk to people about the amount of traffic that goes through the villages now that bypasses Junction 10. And I always feel like I think we're victims of Junction 10 rather than being, having a using of Junction 10. And as I say, those are my problems with this. I don't think there's any way to solve it. And so I think when we built the houses, it will just back up again. We're not solving anything at the moment at all, are we? Really? Putting another island in, I think you said it, it just slows everything down again, doesn't it? I mean, it's a lot safer maybe slowing things down, but by the time everybody's slowed down, the amount of traffic fumes and all the rest of it going round that islands and the other islands, it's just going nowhere. It'd be a nice and smooth road to nowhere.
Well, mate, having regularly driven down the A30 and seeing the amount of investments and fabulous design that's going on that, it does feel as though we're not being treated the same. I don't want to come out with a hard lock story, but it's a masterful piece of engineering. Yeah, the A30 improvements. But I mean, you're right. I mean, I first time I went down the A30 for a long time was a few years ago, and I was dreading it. So I was in my sort of early 20s when I drove up the last time in the dead of night, and in the sort of traffic anyway. And I was dreading going down there. It was an absolutely beautiful journey down there. And I thought, what an investment that they put on. And when you go into Wales, the amount of investment in the roads down there, where you can get right into central Wales. But you can't get from Brendan to
you can't get from Brendan to Addiston. And it looks like it's going to be a nice bit of road, but it's not going anywhere. Sorry for putting it.
Jackie.
No, I mean, to be honest, I think Dorothy, in the response, that has actually slightly put a more favourable preferred option around option B. And I have to say, having listened to what would happen under each of the options, I do think there is some potential benefit under option B. So, for example, I said, what if you're coming down Long Street, what happens under any of these options? And obviously under option A, you hit a set of traffic lights, which are going to cause even more queues going up and down and congestion flowing back. And actually traffic lights are the most, the least expensive of those. Under option B, I think option B does actually separate out, because you come out of Long Street onto the relief, what was the old A5, and you travel down until you hit a much bigger roundabout, basically, either right down the bottom or the most immediate one to go back up to junction 10. So, I do think, to be fair to them, when I said, but aren't you just going to go for the cheaper option? They said no, and will the budget stretch to actually do option B? They said yes, it will. So trying to be fair to them, I think they are genuinely trying to understand which of these options, in a more kind of outline sense, would be preferable. And it did seem to me that option B does separate out more the local traffic from the main thrust of the A5 flows. And if we're going to do anything, we should at least say, I guess, well, if you're going to go for one of these, let's go for the one that we think is going to have the most benefit in terms of the local congestion that there is. I think the issue about the New Street left turn is a problem, because again, we heard that when we couldn't see it anywhere. Can you left turn onto the A5 from New Street or not? And they obviously are wanting, as National Highways, to stop that for some reason, even though it's been going on for I don't know how many years. And the other thing, just to say, is that I think they do know where the relief road is going to end up. That's why they put a big new roundabout further down. And I think they're assuming that the relief road will come out at that roundabout. It's just they haven't shown it. No? No? Oh, right. Okay, fine. No. Well, that was certainly they. All right. Well, I thought that's one of the reasons why they were having such a big roundabout, was so that it could actually feed the. Anyway, I mean, I suppose the thing is, have we got enough in Dorothy's response and with the comments from the exec team to the exec board to actually guide them? I mean, they're a nice lot. They are working really hard. They're going to all these kind of evening sessions where, desperate to get people to come along. And, they're an organisation that's disconnected, really, aren't they?
They certainly feel like it, having sat on the A5 partnership.
Yes, we still have
disconnected from each other. Never mind.
The Brendan public one as well on.
Yes, I know.
So I will be attending that as well.
Yeah.
So if everyone wants to.
So that's complexity with points Aidan and Jackie have raised.
Yes, it was just to ask for your views, really, because yes, you're right. I was pointing to option B was, on balance, probably the better one, but it was interesting that you're saying far too many roundabouts, and whether we could see whether they could go down to one island, but halfway through the dual carriageway, so that it actually, there isn't this new one near to Grendon, because you've already got an island at Spon Lane, and eventually that should actually go up and over the top of Grendon eventually. So it's
So
just
you're thinking
another
option B, you could
whether-
have one big roundabout and rather than two roundabouts.
Yeah, so
on
if
that
you had an
roundabout.
island here,
Yeah,
because then it could link in more directly, because the link road is actually in the allocation is actually over here. It isn't. So you've got the island towards Grendon, but where the trees are on the map underneath, that's where the allocation actually is, and that's where it comes out onto the old A5. And whether, because then that would encourage more people to use the link road rather than Long Street. So
Should we
it's
be
just a-
choosing an option? So your feedback is nicely critical and is clear about the frustrations that are felt by officers and members. But are we not falling into a trap where we know we want red, but we're being told we can only have pink, yellow and blue, therefore we're choosing pink, even though we want red? So do we just avoid going for a preferred option? Because as you demonstrated, Doc, even the preferred option doesn't work. You know, so let's not get drawn into that trap of choosing one.
well, I would be favourite. I mean, if there's an alternative fourth option that we need to put on the table, please could you consider that because of X, Y, and Z? Then we should do that.
Yeah, well, please come back to us and talk about, we don't think this works.
Yeah.
We have concerns about deliverability, we have concerns about the time frame, we have concerns about community concerns and tensions and business tensions. Has anybody got anything else to add before I just throw into? No, yes, excuse me, I raise the fatality, serious injury rates for our roads. I think any comment about making the road safer other than our name is completely absent from the consultation process. Why is that important? Because we know that the A5 is the most dangerous road in the whole of Warwickshire. So can we please have some information, as Dan has requested, in terms of how these schemes impact on road safety? And we know that there was a fatality at this location in the last 12 months. And then my second one is that point about crossing the A5. So
Yeah.
we've consistently been told that the existing road bridge at Dordon is not suitable for use by anybody other than able-bodied people. So
And ditto the crossing at Grendon as well, in terms of the severance of that bit, which has got more houses now, and from Boot Hill and the rest.
So this absence to address the needs of people with mobility issues is highly unacceptable. It is unacceptable for those residents who live on the Lower House Farm side of the A5, but it is also highly unacceptable for all those residents looking at green travel choices and walking to work at our major employment site at Birch Coppice and Court 42, because if you are anything other than able-bodied, you cannot cross the A5. So as a matter of consideration, it needs to be addressed as a priority. Dan?
I think the main point there is that they put in those pedestrian crossings, I don't know what the traffic lights, aren't they, the crossings up by the Jitty. I don't know, it's just always at the Jitty, sorry, but or by the old ambulance station. If you walk past the village hall, down there, and out there is actually to take you to the pond and everything down by Ocado.
Yeah.
Although I wouldn't expect that's great for somebody, as you said, with disabilities, whatever, from the other side of Dordon, say New Street, whatever. It's a decent walk.
Dan, go on over to Cornwall and look at all the tunnels that have been built under the A30. Look at the road footbridges that have been built. It's astounding.
Yeah, I
Look at the
agree.
bridges built out down at on the Anston bit there. That's that's a lovely long slope. The slope there. It's
So much that could be done. Like that, and I think that's the key bit here is the local plan. My biggest belief has always been that the local plan can be positive, but we have to show the residents that it's positive. The A5 will always be one of the biggest obstacles that we face as a council with the local plan on perception and obviously on operational. So, you know, I think it could have a real big effect, but.
Okay. Any more for any more? I'm conscious of time. We've been there for an hour.
Just a thought on that was to say, I mean, when the houses are built there, and if that was to go out, you're going to have a lot of people using that sort of, you know, local traffic just nipping about, nipping down to get to the local shop, nipping down to, and there's going to be a lot of, and there's a lot of people who want to walk or push bike down to the local Grendon and there's a new co-op down there and place that, or even up into Dordon to get something rather than sort of, you know, so there's got to be a sort of, like I say, a safe method of negotiating that, isn't it, around that way, and getting back up, getting to the areas where people need to go to service their life, you know. Just nipping out for the metaphorical packet of fags, something, you know, in a paper. It's not. It's going to be quite isolated there. We're going to build a ghetto if we're not careful, and if we can't get people to those areas.
Without doubt, and we recognise that the resident population of H4 that move in will very likely be a commuting population.
Yeah.
So you've got to do something to enable these people, because there are no jobs on that side of the A5.
Well, everywhere, anybody moves into anywhere in North Warwickshire, small villages, is a commuting population, aren't they? I mean, you know, you move into anywhere and you need a vehicle. You can't rely on buses for certain.
Okay. Right. Thank you. Any more before we leave Dot with the recommendation? And the recommendation is on the report that it is agreed to delegate to the Chief Executive. That it is agreed to delegate to the Chief Executive to submit to the Council's response incorporating comments from the board. Does that make sense? That it is agreed to delegate to the Chief Executive to submit the Council's response incorporating comments from the board. There you go. Right. Proposer, Dan, seconder, Jackie, all in favour? Okay, and Mike and Dot, thank you for your candour, and Michael.
Yes.
I don't know how many years you've been going to the A5 strategy group, but it's good to see that